Okay. Thank you everyone for your time today and joining the Rapido monthly update for the July 2025 webinar. My name is Megan Weldon. I'm product manager on the Rapido team here at Claravit. My email is available there on the screen for us to have any follow-up conversations from today's content or generally for us to connect about Rapido at your library. Please reach out. Happy to work with you via email or set up a meeting. Okay, today's agenda for the webinar is first a few topics for the Rapido community, followed by highlights of the upcoming Rapido monthly release. This webinar will be touching on highlights for the August 2025 release. Following that will be a few frequently asked questions, covering some questions that have come up lately in conversations with our meetings with libraries using Rapido. And after that, I will dive into the chat to look at questions that you put forward today, see if there are any questions that we can address in today's time. Otherwise, let's follow up as needed for your questions. Okay, first topic, our Rapido community. Let's get into that. So start this conversation today by saying welcome to new colleagues and libraries who have joined the Rapido community. The community continues to grow rapidly this year. Started out at 152 instances live. To date, we're at about 170. An exciting item from this year is we've seen libraries complete implementations every month so far this year. And already looking at the second half of this year, that trend continues with libraries completing implementations in Australia, in the US, and in Hong Kong as well. In addition to these libraries joining the Rapido community, other kind of areas of growth that we're seeing is in conversations around new pods and joining new pods as libraries expand their use of Rapido. So if you follow the pods page, you'll see that there are new pods there. In addition to those public pods, there are private pods, so connections happening behind the scenes that we're seeing. So for example, private pods might be pods that are connecting library consortia that are not just open, available for all attendees. So maybe an example of that would be recently we created a Big Ten pod for libraries who are in the Big Ten consortia who are using Rapido, who want to connect to each other that way. We've also created a Veil pod for that consortia. We're working actively with libraries to create the first pod in Africa, which will be on the pods page once that is sorted. Additional pod creations this month that are exciting is we're seeing the first hybrid pods in Australia. What is a hybrid pod? That is a pod connecting libraries who are using Rapido with their colleagues who are using Alma Resource Sharing. Those libraries who are joining the pod as Alma Resource Sharing libraries are setting up their familiar Alma Resource Sharing peer-to-peer connections and then defining participating items on the pod once they're added to allow Rapido libraries to work with them and for them to work with their Rapido libraries in workflows that are familiar. May that be the Alma resource sharing workflows on that end for those libraries or the workflows in Rapido for the Rapido libraries. So this month we saw our first hybrid pods go live in Australia. Very exciting work by that community to get that conversation and process started. And then in the US, there have been quite a few hybrid pods in play for some time now, but we saw the community implement the first nationwide hybrid pod. Very exciting to see the new connections and pods being created for libraries to facilitate either new connections with new partners, work with each other via new pods for new pod terms, or support their prioritization of their pods of their partners via having new pods to order for organizing their partner connections. On the theme of pods, as you may know, ebook functionality was released January 2025 this year in Rapido, and we have the ebook international pod. Here on the screen, you see a quote from Shannon Pritting, director of SUNY Empire State College, one of the libraries who was involved in testing the ebook functionality prior to the release of that functionality and creation of that pod. I had a nice update that in my inbox from Shannon from participating in that pod that he said I could share. So, in summary, I'm sharing some of Shannon's words with you today. When doing a reference shift at our working reference at the for SUNY Empire State College, Shannon was working with the student over the past few days as she refined her topic that involved military spouses and depictions in film television. Uh, they had found some articles and then discovered an ebook that had several chapters that looked relevant. We didn't own or subscribe to the title, so I first looked at purchase availability, which it was, then looked at Rapido, hoping to get a request for the chapter to get the student started with. Shannon says he was surprised when, he writes, I was surprised when I saw the ebook was available for a loan, so I submitted a request, and 3.5 hours later, the entire ebook was delivered via a secure link via email. This will allow her to explore a subtopic that she wouldn't be able to in her essay revision. So they were able to get that ebook from their ebook pod partners in 3.5 hours without the library necessarily pursuing a purchase of that title, and without waiting a few days for that to become available. So that was an exciting use of the ebook pod for that library. If you're interested in participating in the ebook pod, you can indicate as such on the pod's form page and begin borrowing full ebooks and lending full ebooks through the ebook DRM free international pod with your library partners. Okay. Moving from the conversation of the Rapido community specific updates and more into development highlights. This first development highlight that I want to speak to from the August release is in regards to renewing or changing how we work with renewals in Rapido. So previously, prior to the August release, renewals worked in one way and they're going to be working in a new way. So giving you context, how did they work previously? Previously, the renewal dates were calculated to consider the pod loan period minus the pod delivery time. So what does this mean? How does this work? Or how did this work? So if a pod has a pod term or has a pod term that allows renewals, so that renewal value being yes on the pod term, and perhaps the pod had a loan period of 21 days with a delivery period of 7 days. If the renewal went through on May 1st, 2025, then the renewal request date is now May 22nd, 2025. So it's that 21 minus the 7 getting added or calculated for that renewal. Then, how is it going to work come the August release? It's going to be a bit more consistent with how that loan period is calculated today. So, for example, again, we're looking at that same pod. That pod is working, a group of libraries working together with renewals allowed, working together with a loan period of 21 days and a delivery period of 7 days. If the renewal were to take place on May 21st, then the renewal request date would be updated to the May 29th. So taking into account the delivery period as well as the loan period in calculating that renewal. So that's an update that you'll see regarding renewals in the August release. One more renewal related update to highlight as well coming with the August release. And this is related to a new status. So you'll see with the August release, a new status available to you if you choose to enable it. This release comes to you via the idea exchange process from the community. So today, if renewals occur, your lending colleagues are able to just see those requests, maintaining the received by partner status. However, lending colleagues may want to have the visibility on that lending request that a renewal was accepted or a renewal occurred on that request, even though it's an automated process. If libraries are interested in having this visibility available to them in their lending workflow, there is a new parameter to set to true at your institution, which you would do via the configuration fulfillment, general, other settings pathway. Within that, you would search for the lending request renewed status and set that to true. Once enabled, your team will see the status of renewal accepted as one of the various statuses that would come through in their lending workflow. If you enable this status, and it is then something that you may want to consider if you are having any renewal-based sets, or if this is a status you would want to monitor in some way, creating a new set accordingly, but that is an option available to you with the August release. Okay, moving on from the idea or topic of renewals in Rapido from the August release, but staying with the theme of idea exchange, we have our next development. The next development comes to you from the fulfillment and resource sharing idea exchange pathway, and it is for the libraries who are working with Alma as their LMS, wanting to convert purchase requests into resource sharing requests. So the use case, this functionality now enables libraries who have a purchase request to determine if they want to pursue this as a resource sharing request, they can do so. This is something that it will be available to libraries once they've activated this functionality via a support ticket. So you'll need to have this functionality activated via a support ticket. Then it would, once that is completed, it is an option for folks who are doing the purchase request for purchase request operators or managers who also are allowed to create resource sharing requests. So they would need the purchase request operators managers role, as well as the fulfillment service operators manager or operator or manager role. So those role combinations in combined with the support ticket would allow libraries to have this option to then, when in the acquisitions workflow, create a resource sharing request. So once these pieces are in play, then when folks are in their purchase request workflow, they would see the create resource sharing request as an option for their workflows. Okay. The next development is more in the sphere, and the next few are related more in the sphere of working with your rapid ILL networks. So in some cases, a request might take a little bit of time to get sent to the rapid ILL network. In that meantime, you as a borrowing staff person may be wondering what's happening. And what we wanted to do with this development is give you more insight so that you aren't wondering why it hasn't yet sent, or wondering what's happening with that request. So in scenarios where a request might be taking a bit of time to go to Rapid, you'll now see an alert on that request. That alert will read, waiting for rapid response. That alert is enabled, but you can change the status or the setting regarding that alert via configuration, resource sharing, manage borrowing alerts. This alert will just automatically be applied to a request if a request is taking a little bit of time, or if there is some delay in sending it to the Rapid ILL network. Once the request does send to that Rapid ILL network, the alert will automatically be removed so that your staff don't have that alert when it's not relevant or valid to them. So that is a new alert that colleagues may see on their borrowing requests going forward with the August release, just to give them some insight that the request is still processing, but there's a little bit of delay in getting it sent to that network. Again, this is something that doesn't happen too often, but giving staff that visibility and information when it is occurring. The next development is also related. So again, in those instances, few and far between, but it could happen where requests are taking some time to go to the Rapid ILL network, and even rarer when there is unable to send to the Rapid ILL network. Maybe the connection didn't go through. If it's taken more than 15 minutes and it's tried several times to send through and unable to send, there'll be a new history in that request, and that history update will be connection to Rapid could not be reestablished. So if you have a request that was unfilled and you see this history status that indicates to your colleagues or your team that the request did not get sent to the Rapido network. You then have that information to inform your decisions on your workflows. If you want to continue with your additional partners or pursue purchase workflows, or simply send that back into the Rapido ecosystem, or into the Rapido ecosystem for the first time, that information is now there for you to make your decisions. So those are two different developments related to working with the Rapid network to give your library colleagues and yourselves a bit more information if a request is taking a bit of time or is not successful in sending to the Rapid network. The next development is also related to the borrowing workflow in for Rapido based requests, moving to that development now, and that is changes to the resupply action. So today you may already be familiar. You, as a borrower, you have the resupply request action available to you. This action might be used by colleagues if you're finding that there is a problem with the content of the digitally supplied request. This allows you to communicate to the lender that they need to resupply the content. For example, maybe they digitize the content, but it's missing a page. Previously, you could only perform the resupply once. Now the resupply action will be available to you to perform up to 8 times. The resupply will can be performed on a single lender twice. So if that lender performs the resupply but is still not provided you with the content, or the content provided is still problematic in some way, it will move on automatically from that lender to the next lender so that you can work with a new lender to get that content supplied. If for whatever reason you need to perform the resupply action with that lender, you can do so, and it will be available to you for working with up to 4 different lenders. Then thinking about the other side of this workflow, this component isn't new, but I think it warrants just highlighting here. If you are a lender working with requests that have received that resupply action, you can have an alert letting you know that this is what has occurred. So by default, the alert is disabled. I might suggest to folks that you enable this alert. You can do so via the configuration, resource sharing, manage lending alerts pathway. Then when you're in that manage lending alerts menu, you'll see one titled resend request received. If you enable that, then as a lender, you would see this alert on your requests to indicate that a resend has been requested. Not only can you enable this alert, or might you consider enabling this alert, I might suggest that you create a set based on this alert to help you find these requests. How you would do that was within the Facets tab, so under Alerts, select the Resend Request Received alert, add that as a facet, and then save that set. That can help you as a lender identify when a resupply is needed for you to perform the resupply action to get a new and updated version of that content supplied to that borrower. Maybe that is, again, the missing page example, getting that page added back into that PDF and sent that along to your partner. So that covers the various release highlights that I wanted to acknowledge in today's content. Now I'm going to move into a few frequently asked questions, and then look to a few questions that you might have in your have presented in the chat today. So a few frequently asked questions diving into this. To address a question that came across the listserv recently regarding copyright rules, just wanted to highlight that there is the need to enable 2 different copyright rule parameters to true for your copyright rules to run. So if you're seeing that your copyright rules are not running at your library, I would first recommend that you check the settings here. there are two different parameters to set to true. Note they are under two different configuration pathways. The Rapido show copyright on ISO being set to true can be done so via the configuration resource sharing general other settings pathway, while the RS borrower copyright management value set to true is done so under the configuration fulfillment general other settings pathway. I will be sharing links at the end of today's session. This link to documentation that acknowledges this is included in the links there. So on the topic of copyright, I also see questions about what are copyright rules that other institutions are using. I'm going to present examples of two of the common ones that I see. This does not mean that it is necessary for your library, just providing use cases of the functionality that I see frequently at other institutions. So here's an example of a borrowing copyright rule. This is an example of a library wanting to stop requests when they've exceeded, a user's exceeded a certain number of requests for a specific resource. Here, the variables are not necessarily what I see across institutions, but the format is what I see at various institutions that may be of interest to you. So the rule looks like input parameter, including a time span. This example includes 12. Other examples I see frequently are 6, to say 6 months or 12 months. Your time interval may vary from this. This example says the number of requests for a specific resource per user is 1. Other institutions, I see this being greater than 3, greater than 5. This number really varies quite a lot, but once it's greater than this number of requests within a certain time frame, libraries often like to choose the blocks digitization workflow action and identify a specific label. Here, my example is multiple request label. I've even seen some library use the glutton label, whatever kind of label makes sense to your institution to communicate to your staff why this request is being stopped for copyright review, whether that is querying your then decision to move it forward with no restriction, mark it as copyright approved, use purchase workflows, use convert workflows, query your patrons, whatever decision is next and appropriate for your institution. But this is a rule, kind of a formula that I see frequently in use. One other copyright rule kind of equation that I see commonly in play is to stop requests using the blocks digitization workflow as the borrowing copyright setup choice in combination with some sort of total copyright work percentage. So if what this rule would do is if the work is known, if the request is known to be more than the X% of the work, in this example 11%, other libraries it's 10, 20, 30, 15, whatever is copyright compliance for your institution in play, then an associated label. So again, making this label different to other copyright rule labels that you may have in use for your other copyright remediation rule so that you can identify what rule actually stopped this request. Here it's an example is digitization over 11%. Libraries have various kind of flavors of this, whether it's more than a certain percent or exceeds percentage, whatever kind of label makes sense. And then again, the workflow next steps are up to you. Okay. Those are borrowing related workflows. The next one that I have wanted to highlight based on a lot of questions I get is a lending related workflow, and that is related to this a scan-in message that can be configured. So there is a pop-up message that you can configure under physical fulfillment scan-in message configuration, setting this pop-up message to yes. Why would you do this, or when is it helpful for you? So as a lender, if you scan in the request, update it to shipped physically, sometimes user error, etc., various scenarios can arise where you want it in a second time, which if you do so when it's shipped physically would complete the request automatically without it then being received and updated by your partner and returned by your partner. To prevent this closing out that request or moving it to the next status without it having gone out to your partner, you can update this pop-up message so that if you scan in that item for a second time after you've done the shift physically, it would ask, hey, it would give you this pop-up message and allow your staff to confirm or cancel that action of closing out the request. This pop-up message isn't going to be something that pops up every single time you scan in an item, only when it is scanned in at the shipped physically status. So it's not going to be something that pops up every time in your workflow or be an additional click all of the time, because again, most of those requests are going to be returned by partner, etc. This is more so in that scenario where the double scan is occurring. Okay. The next few questions or slides relate to questions for customizing Rapido for your workflow, and they can be done for the borrowing or lending. My screenshots typically exemplify borrowing because that's just the way that pathway that I went in, but you can customize the borrowing and lending view. Okay, this example came up in a conversation specifically from a library wanting to add the request note to their visibility in their when they're looking at their borrowing requests in the collapsed view. But it's just generally being able to customize how those requests look for you, whether it's from the borrowing or the lending. How you would do this, if you go from the borrowing view or the lending view, you'll see that little gear icon that I have the one and the box near. If you select that menu, you'll see this customization menu open. From this customization menu, if you select records customization, you can choose personalizations for your personal view for your borrowing or your lending requests. You can see how you can customize those columns in that collapsed view, the first column, second column, and you can activate or deactivate what fields show in that view and drag and drop accordingly, so you can make that request note visible, for example, in that borrow request if you want it to be. Another customization, instead of just in the request view, the next one is in the actions menu. So here in that same menu, again, we did this from the borrowing requests. For this example, go into that little gear icon, but here you're then selecting the active actions customization. Why might you want to customize your action menu? Maybe now that you've been using Rapido for some time, you have found that you use some actions more than others. Maybe they aren't the actions that are highest in that list. So here I have customized my actions menu via this actions customization. And previously my action menu looked, when I went to a request and selected the three dots action menu, my actions were ordered, view local resources, cancel, duplicate, etc. Maybe as a library, I know that in my workflows, I'm using different workflow actions more frequently. So I've modified that to show that those actions in that more priority order for my use. Maybe that is the enrich from global index, convert request type, recalculate partners, search and market, etc. So you can personalize that from your view based on the actions that you use more regularly. Okay. Also within this menu, you see facets customization. Just want to share a screenshot of that potential too. So within your facets, you might be faceting quite regularly. That may mean there is opportunity for you to create a set that supports your workflow. But if it isn't a needed set and you just are in facets quite a bit, maybe there are facets that you action on more often than others. By default here we have Rapido indicator as the top one on the left, followed by labels, followed by activity status, etc. You can customize that so that you have status, labels, creation date, or whatever kind of order makes sense for your day-to-day use. So those are a few different customizations that have come up in recent conversations with libraries to highlight in today's frequently asked questions. I've got some links to share with you today. I will get those into the chat and then also see what questions that you've put forward. Okay. Those links that I referenced cover the content from today's webinar. release notes, borrowing alerts, lending alerts, this lending scan and pop-up message, various Rapido pods information, copyright rule settings, all of the topics from today are covered in those note links. They're available to you in the chat today. The status that I referenced as a part of the August release notes is a lender workflow status. So clarifying that question for you, it's a lender workflow status. Okay. Not yet seeing any other questions in the chat. Please feel free to put them in there. I'll hang out for a moment to address any new questions. Otherwise, if you want to ask questions beyond today's session or connected with about Rapido at your library, throwing my email into the chat as well. Now that's in the chat. If you don't yet have my email, we can connect. And seeing one more question before our time is up today. Here we go. Okay. For your question that you've put into the chat, let's follow up the email. I don't have an answer for you today regarding that customization that you're looking for. Okay. Right, not seeing any other questions in today's chat. Thank you all for your time. Please grab the links if you would like to access them beyond today's session. Thank you.